in terms of attack, how, you know, we think of attack, we've got all our different shots, we've got our cuts, wraps, snaps, and then the more tricky ones, like you got thrust, and then the more trickier things that come into that. It's more about the aspects of the defense and make it as a whole. So does anyone have fire out some things that are important to a good defense? Regardless of weapon type.
Have a stance that requires minimal movement to block shots.
Yep, so that's good. So that definitely comes into one of my aspects. What else?
I blanked on the question.
What are some aspects that can make up defense? So the various.
Okay.
So stance is one, as you said.
Evasion.
Yep, evasion, definitely. Movement.
Footwork.
Mainly if you're Nick.
Yeah, yes, Nick.
He's very good.
Nick is a great example of evasion.
There's blocking by moving your arm.
Yep.
And then there's blocking by changing your aspect.
Yes, definitely.
Depending on your style, soft blocking or hard blocking.
Yep, that's a really good one to come into. That's definitely a more.
I definitely need to work.
I
on
would say
soft
that comes
blocks.
into a kind of almost an aggressive form of defense. The soft or hard blocking, because it comes into controlling of their weapon. So it's more about what are you doing to them. So I'll give it. So I'll go through what I've put down here. So and I think it does. I think first of all we've got evasion, we've got movement. So that's the first aspect of defense.
Shield types.
Pardon?
Shield types is a big one as well.
Yeah. So, but not even getting to that, to even at that point. So movement is. If we start at movement, that's, you know, your ability to get out of the way and not even be hit in the first place. If you're not getting hit by their weapon, you're not going to get killed. So that's the first start. The next one I would say is a static defense, and this falls into what Cormac was saying earlier about your stance and just blocking their shot. So I would say a static defense is blocking that happens purely due to your stance and your guard. So without moving anything, if I'm here with one of these, if I'm not moving at all, these are the areas that I'm not going to get hit. And exactly. So that's what I would say is a static defense. And depending on what your stance is, different things. However you look at it, you're going to be covering different areas, even with different weapon types, even with Florentine. You know, if Jib's holding out like this, a static, this is what's not going to be hit. You know, when you've got a great weapon or great sword, for instance, you're holding out like this, it's going to stop less. And as you know, different weapon types, different stances will have different levels of your static defense. The next one, I would say, is your dynamic defense. And that is then, as Cormac was saying as well, when you're actually moving your weapon or your sword or your shield to block. So if I grab my shield again, and Cormac comes up, so static defense before, this is all it's hitting, but now he's going for somewhere, so now he's going to go for this gap here that isn't in my static defense, but my dynamic defense is moving and it's stopping that shot coming in. So that's what I would say is that the next aspect is being able to move. Either you're moving the shield or your sword, or you're moving your body with those weapons. I would say that potentially partly comes into movement. I would say movement is more the moving of your physical body or completely dodging. So rather than moving your body to block.
One actually common aspect of this is if you've got a kind of low stance, and there's the big gap up there.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get pinned for that as long range, and you just take a step back. That's the time.
So that's a good example of when a movement will be a good form of defense.
That'd be the most common. Unless you...
The next form, I would say, is offensive defense. So this falls into two things. I would say that this comes into counter shot placement and shot placement in general. If you're placing your shots up with your basket hilt in front of your face, yes, it's an offensive shot, but you are also defending yourself at the same time because that snapshot isn't going to come through. And so I would say that there's definitely aspects of that. Great swords have to do that a lot. If you're not defending while you're throwing, you're going to get pinged. Pole arms as well to a small extent. And then the other aspect of the offensive defense is just offense in general. If you're throwing shots, you're keeping them on their back foot, they're not going to be able to hit you, and they're focusing more on defending rather than attacking you. So that's another form of defense in a way. As they say, offense is, or the best defense is a sort of offense. So the final thing that I would argue is what I came up with for another form of defense is the psychological defense. This one's a bit harder and it comes a bit more with time. One aspect of a psychological defense is having a white belt. Go into a battlefield, and if you're a knight, you've already got a psychological defense happening. They are already going to be less likely to jump you.
A good example of a psychological defense would be leg defense. So if somebody's got a bit of a gap in the leg, and Callum comes in and thinks, oh, that's a bit of gap, blocked it straight away.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily try for it again.
Exactly. And it also comes in, so that's a perfect example of your general stance.
And that is actually an accidental one, but something you should be aware of.
And that comes in as a good example of how your natural stance comes into it. So, for instance, for me, one of those big ones is my A-frame. The A-frame has a massive gap down the middle, which is very much open to thrusts. However, I know that it's a gap, and so as part of my psychological defense, someone can look to, unless, don't get me wrong, Gab's got me with it with an opening shot on the weekend. It was an excellent shot, but for the most part, anyone who does an opening shot with me that isn't using a glaive is usually unlikely to hit that opening thrust. So that's part of my psychological defense. It's making them think that they can hit it, but I know that they can't. And so they come in, I can block it and then go for a shot. Also, just generally, as more of an offensive defense is, fakes, things like that used in a defensive manner. So if someone's coming up to attack me, and they're coming in for a shot, and I just fake them. I'm not even looking to throw the shot, it's just to get them to back off, get them to think twice. So the psychological defense is something that comes with time, something that you will learn over time how to develop it, and but I would say those are the aspects of defense that I think are important. Does anyone else have any other things that they have general aspects that can apply overall to, regardless of weapon style?
Do you discuss range much?
Yeah, range is a very good one. Excellent. So I would say range would come potentially even before movement, I guess. It's without even moving, can you keep them at bay by your range? It's like whether you've got a really long sword and you've got long arms, it kind of, I guess, comes into offensive and psychological. They know that you're far away, so you're not even in range yet and you're not getting hit, especially if you've got pole weapon and you've got that massive amount of range. That is kind of your defensive zone, is keeping them in that range. where they can't actually get to you in the first
There's
place.
actually a one of the things you've got to remember is throwing a leg shot. You've got less range than throwing a head shot. So, what's the reach like? Actually, I'm going to stand up next to Callum, and we're going to go. So Callum's got what's that? 10 centimetres, 15 centimetres on there. 15 centimetres at least.
G'day, how you going? You wanna? We're just doing some. So we're part of the Monash Ready group. Yeah. So we're just running training sessions.
You're gonna say this is the 5th time we've done this?
So you've got
A lot of
15
range.
centimetre, advantage on me, but
Yeah.
it goes. Is that the right bit? Things get beyond that. So. Probably forward to get a shot.
Yeah.
Okay. But throwing a leg shot.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Now I come here, all of a sudden, in range, out of range from me.
Yeah.
So, by being at this range, which is still a range at which you've got, you're under threat. That range is an effective defence against a leg shot.
So yeah, so that is a good example of how the range, knowing your range is important. Knowing what aspects of you are in risk or at risk, depending on your range. Any other aspects of defense that people can think of? No. That's cool. See, nice to meet you.
I'm thinking of timing, but I don't know what I could apply it with it.
Timing, yeah. So timing.
Would focus more with evasion.
Yeah, so that would probably that probably ties in with evasion and dynamic blocking, knowing their timing, being able to watch their timing. I would. So tonight we're we could in theory spend a whole month on defense. We will probably come back at a later point to touch on some of these different aspects. I think next week we'll do movement. But there's lots of different aspects that we could talk about. Tonight we're probably just going to focus on the statics and dynamic blocking. And for Olivia in particular, we're going to look at how your stance affects these things. Because especially if you're going to be, we'll get you using this shield tonight because it's kind of like the buckler hold, but it gives you a bit more static defense. Which is always good when you're starting because you don't want to have to worry about trying to block things because you just have that greater surface.
One other thing that I
Yeah.
mentioned that is just part of defense is actually vision as well,
Definitely. Vision.
which it comes in when you're using big shield.
Yes, exactly. So you would be, when you're using the static defense, you'd be sacrificing some of your vision for a greater static defense. Whereas if you're using buckler, you're having less static defense, which should give you greater vision and in theory a greater dynamic defense, greater movement and evasion. So definitely, yeah, that's definitely a good one. So what if I'm using the shield here, what are some stances that I could have with this shield?
The dashboard.
Dashboard, so what are we looking at that?
So this would have been the very old style of what I used to do. Just have your shield right in front of you, pretty much like this.
Yeah.
Fight like this, essentially.
Like this.
Yeah, Cormax will show you. He's fought dash.
Cool. So if we're fighting like this, where would we say, what are the strengths in terms of the aspects of defense? If I go shield foot forward, or is that, can you do it either way, or what is, which way is
you
the
should be
one?
able to do it either way.
Yeah.
Just as long as you're aware of where the tip is.
Yeah.
So that currently has your leg.
Yeah.
So I can just do that. And I take to the right.
Cool. So what would we say this stance has strengths in terms of the aspects of defense?
Extreme minimal need for movement.
Yeah. So we've got that high static defense. We don't need to move very much. Cormac's looking at my body.
I would also say having the shield foot forward, you're more defensive than if you were having
Yes, definitely. Shield foot forward. You've kind of got your shield poking forward a little bit more. You can have your arm closer to your body. As you can see, because I've got this here, but I've also got it forward. If I have my sword foot forward, you see how suddenly that subtle difference in their arm placement. I've now got my arm slightly more out. It's going to get a bit more tired if I want to keep it out this far. I could keep it closer to my body and have a slightly more offensive stuff, but it's now back a bit more, and I've actually opened up a little bit more as well.
That's a hard shot to get unless you've made a mistake.
Yes.
Because it's a slow shot.
So this one is covering, if you have a look here, it's covering, there's not a lot of my body you can see. I've got my sword up here, and this will be covering my head. However, the one thing is here's your static defense for your head isn't huge. Yes, Cormac has got, you know, I've kind of got this here and I will stop a lot of things, but those rats will come in, and even a good, like those thrusts, and even like a really nice snap will be able to come in if he gets that angle in. But I've got that whole body static defense going. The dynamic defense here, in particular, this does relate more to center boss shields, but large center boss shields tends to be more of a movement around the shield as opposed to just moving it, because your arm will get tired if you're doing this all the time. It's more of a I'm ducking, I'm keeping up and I'm ducking behind it. I'm doing, that's my dynamic blocking here, and my dynamic blocking up here is I'm just moving the head. So that's definitely one of the strengths in that type of stance. What's another stance that we could do? Hey friend! Pardon, what did you say?
Horse stance.
Horse stance, yeah, so a horse stance is a good stance, is a stance for...
It's pretty much your A-frame anyway.
yeah, it's pretty much kind of does come into the A-frame. So the A-frame style is what I like to do, and that's having the shield up here, and
I assume A-frame is less of a thing for
Well, you just got advised on the weekend.
yes, I actually got advice on the weekend to potentially switch to a center boss. I think,
I've got some videos I can share with you.
Yeah.
SCA tell me do it.
because if you, in a way, if you can kind of get it in the right position and have it kind of resting on your body.
So the main thing is, if you've fired off a shot somewhere,
Yeah.
and I've gone like that underneath,
Yeah.
it's really hard on his old shield to get across.
Because what I have to do is I have to drag my whole arm down. But this, if he's throwing that shot, I just go, like, it's really
you
a
can
lot.
rotate it as well. It's moving.
Yeah, it's just, I can just flick it across. And all I need to do, if you throw that shot onto my body, really, all I need to do is that. I'm just flicking it down and flicking it back up again. So, yeah, I actually have been advised to go center boss. There's also another option, but that's, I might have to think about what I might do, make both and see. But the other option is that currently my shield, I'm holding it very much like this. If it's to make it wider and have it more like that, so it's kind of more of a that as opposed to a bring this across. If I want to go the straps option. But yeah, so the A-frame is, yeah, you've got it up here like this. You're making an A. You're kind of statically, you're blocking this whole You're blocking this whole top thing, but you've got a whole lot of legs.
Short shield.
You've got a whole, yeah, it is a bit short. You've got this whole head stuff blocked, but the leg stuff is open. Your dynamic stuff for the legs then comes into, yes, you've got that the slot shot down the middle. If you then start just doing that again, the dynamic stuff comes into moving that across, sucking that down, doing that, blocking, just, yeah, so it's just those type of dynamic movements, shutting off that stuff in the middle. It involves a lot of your legs for the A-frame, especially like leg shots. It'll be, I might just hold this close to my body and I'll just be ducking like so. So that's one as well. A-frame movement is a lot different. So if we go back to the dashboard one, when I'm moving with this, I'm kind of, would you say this feet placement is probably about right for a dashboard?
I bring the toe of your back foot up parallel to the heel of your toes.
Yeah, so movement very high for this. I can move them around a lot very easily. A-frame, if you go in the horse stance, it gets a bit more difficult. You're kind of moving around like that. It's a bit harder because they're already kind of extended. I find with more of a this stance, it gets you a bit more of power to push off.
One comparison you haven't made yet is the close in. So if you go to your dashboard, so if you stay in that close in, all of a sudden, especially if I put pressure on this, it's really hard to stop those deep shots and even across here. However, if you're back in A-frame, you're actually getting a bit more aggressive with where my sword is. I can't get anything there to begin with. If I move across, you're probably going to be following around.
Exactly.
So close in, A-frame closes off a few deep shots that dashboard doesn't.
So the A-frame movement is it's told to be a kind of like a guiding with your forward foot. Yeah, someone's always the first one to move, and small shuffles is what they say to do with that, as opposed to you're there and you can make bigger movements, things like that. Western power stance is another one. That's kind of this kind of thing at the front. You're kind of pushing it out a bit more. You've got the shield forward. You're going to get a lot of static defense there, and your dynamic defense is...
As a reasonably experienced fighter, the thing that's really concerning me at that point is where his sword is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, that's going to come through hard and fast.
Yeah.
As opposed to these ones, or this one. You can pop them reasonably quickly. Just not as that's gonna. It takes nothing to get power on that.
Yeah. So this is going to hit like a truck. And remember what I was saying about psychological defense. So already the psychological defense here is high.
I'm not moving.
So this is already a high psychological defense. Cormac doesn't want to engage.
I'm more reticent to engage.
As opposed to something like this where you look at it and you'll go, yeah, I could probably snipe that head. And I don't think he can get something out massively quickly, but I'm not going to go for anywhere.
With attack, how well you can get around somebody's shield is based on where their basket is. So in the simplest possible terms, you can hold it up like that. My basket is here. There's no chance of getting back. This is why wraps work, because the basket hilt goes around there. With a very centered basket hilt, that's going to have to generate power. It's hard for him to move it around and get the power on that. Whereas back here, it's actually surprisingly easy to move across.
Excellent. Another one I'd say is
Well, I mean, Dash still managed to generate a stupid amount of power from his dashboard still.
and that's the thing is at the end of the day, knights, even people who've been practicing one stance for a long time, will find ways to cheat it. They'll find ways to cut corners, and they'll just be able to do it well. There's many more stances. Another one is the Iron Chicken. We're holding like this, and you've got basket up here. It's more like this.
I thought Iron Chicken was that, wasn't it?
Is it this?
I don't know, I can't remember. I don't use it, so.
Yeah, look, it's, as long as it's the tips in front of the...
So it's kind of like this is your defense, very dynamic. You're moving this a lot to get those shots in, but once again, it's hard because they've got, the thing is with the center boss, you're already going to get a lot of static defense on the whole body because you're usually holding it. So yeah, let's go quickly into Florentine defense. We have a Florentine person here. Kai, how do you defend? What is your current stance?
He doesn't have one. That's the scary thing. He has no stance.
So at the moment, mostly defending sword, and this one working on a bit more of the attack.
Yep. Cool. So,
Did you find the left-hander on the weekend?
By the left-hander, do you mean?
Sephirina.
No, the person
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so would your stance actually change up against the left-hander?
Yeah, so
You fought left-handed?
not that often.
Yeah.
But depending, so this is my default stance. With I do change over. The most common time I do that is actually when I'm fighting a two-handed person, and they actually change their hands on the pole.
excellent. So that depends on which sword you've
Yeah.
got forward.
It's like the two-handed equivalent of are you left or right-handed,
Yeah. So,
and it changes.
so if you go up into your stance, if we have a look, okay, what as a Florentine fighter, what is your static defense? If he stays completely where he is, I am going to, from my range, I can't get into the head from here, I can't get into that side. I could maybe go for the slot into the body or to the leg, but he's actually got it pretty nicely covered here. There's no directly easy shot. Now, Florence takes a lot of dynamic defense. So if we're in the middle of a fight and things are starting to fly, Kai's going to have to move his weapons around a lot, or else something's going to come through. So dynamic defense is a massive thing for a Florentine fighter. The only other form of guard of a Florentine fighter is, there's that one, or like Jib's thing where he has it kind of more around the sides. Truck driver kind of deal.
Makes me think of crab.
Yeah, it does actually. The static defense is still pretty high. You can't really get in nicely, although this middle's a bit more open.
There is one thing to be aware of, which is that anything from there down is reasonably defense.
Yes.
So actually, bottom third, good strong defense. Middle third, iffy defense. Top, you may as well have nothing.
And it will depend on like where you're hitting from. So if you're up in that defense, and if I'm from here, even like if I come to my maximum range, is that here, I could maybe power this through, but even still at the top, I'm still probably not going to get a power this through enough to get the kill. However, if I'm in really close, and if I cut this through, I can probably get the kill. And so it will depend on that. Did you have a question? No. Okay.
The other thing I'll mention on that is, depending again on the range, if someone is outranging me, they'll tend to go more forward.
Yes.
And if they're not, then I'll tend to be a little bit back. That's just to do with, if I'm like this, I can control the tip of the other person's weapon a little bit more.
Yeah.
If I'm like this, I'm in a better position to actually generate and power myself. So I'd say this is more aggressive, this is more defensive. Because really, if someone thrusts at me and I'm able to push it out of the way, then I can go with. Whereas this, I'm not really worried as much about just being stabbed.
Exactly. Another thing is that I use with an actual buckler. So this is just another worktop we've got here today. Obviously, A-frame isn't really going to do much. This, not that useful. The static defense on a buckler is very low. If you're holding that, if you're either doing this type extremely low, it's like extremely low static defense. If I've got a guard that's more like this, slightly higher, but really not massive. So it's all about the static defense. Sorry, the dynamic defense of this one, and it's you're punching out to get that defense on. I am not aware of any real stances beyond those two for a buckler, just the holding it close and getting those, or the out punching in for this one. If there's like, it's more just like shooting it around the body and stuff like that. Cool. I think that's about covering a fair bit right now. So what I want you to do tonight, and if you guys can help,